Okay, we will start the lecture 5. This will be a long lecture. I think I will spend 4 separate video clips to record lectures. This lectures is about the word order. Word order, what is the meaning of word order? Word order means the distribution of power. If you're a wordist, the most important element for you to study international relations is to say analyze the distribution of power. Different distribution of power will lead to different patterns of interstate relations. And then what is the most important element of the distribution of power is the so-called number of power centers, or so-called poles. That is the number of superpowers. We have unipolar system, bipolar system, and multipolar system. I will talk about these 3 types of systems later. But first of all, we have to talk more in details about what is the meaning of power. Power is the most important element when we study word order, because as I mentioned earlier, the distribution of power is important. It's so important. Then, what is power? If we do not have any concept about what is power, then we do not know how power is distributed. Then, of course, the basic meaning of power is whenever A gets B to do something that B would not otherwise have done. That's just B asks, just one person asks another person to do something that person don't want to do. Like the police shoot the tear gas to force the protesters to go away. In fact, the protesters would like to continue the demonstration, but it's because police shoot the tear gas, so they have to be forced to dismiss. This is power. Very, very basic meaning of power. That's the very, very basic meaning of power. However, we have to study power in more details. In international relations, there are 4 types of power. The first one is power as capability, or we better say is called latent power. The second one is relational power. Third one is structural power. Fourth one is soft power. Then what is power as capability? In fact, this type of power is the most traditional type of power of international relations. That is, some kind of elements that is say poses, and this kind of elements can turn to be a force of coercion, mostly related to military capacities. So this is powers as capability. Those components, when we calculate a state's capability, we usually calculate 4 elements. First is military strength, and second is economic development, third population, and the fourth is geography. This type of power, they are very useful for international relations scholars, because we conduct research. We need some data. Power, in fact, is something that very intangible, basically very intangible, and then only when it is used, then we know who is more powerful. So it is, if in peaceful time, if nothing happens, then it's very hard for international relations scholars like me to calculate the state, which states are more powerful, and which state has a more potential to force others to do something. So, this kind of power as capability is very useful for us, because this kind of say, they're more tangible, more observable. We can calculate a state like top 25 military powers. We can calculate how many tanks they have, how many aircraft carriers they have, how many jets they have, and also those jets are they 5th generation or 4th generation jets. I'll talk about what is 5th and 4th generation jets later. It can calculate, easily be calculated. So when we calculate, when we do research and estimate which country is more powerful, and then we translate them, which country is more powerful, and translate them to classify those countries as great powers, superpowers, middle powers. I'll correct it, it's not beginning power, middle powers, or regional powers. Superpowers is United States in today's world. Great powers is China. Usually only China today. We can consider great power, or Russia, as most too, because great powers, superpowers, of course, is here. The best superpower, you say, the military capacity of USA ranked top superpower, and these two follow it is so-called the great powers. They're not, because their capability is not as great as US, and then they do not have so-called the world combat capability. They cannot launch wars in different parts of the world, but they are still very strong, so they're called great power. And then there are some so-called middle power. This is middle power. India, France, UK, Japan, Turkey, Germany. And then later, those are regional powers. Middle powers, they're still a little bit strong, but their influence is limited to region. Say India is very influential, powerful in South Asia region. However, in Pacific region, India is not very important power. UK and Germany is the same. They're very powerful, important players in Europe, not important in Asia. Then, okay. But that's a big question. When we consider whether a state is powerful just by referring to its capability, that's a big problem, because this kind of capabilities is just a potential or latent power. That means a state have a lot of tanks. Okay, those tanks, they are there. They're potentially they can use by a state to wage a war. But maybe those tanks are not well maintained, or the state lacks say drivers for those tanks. So really, when that's really the state go to war, then those tanks are not useful. The best example of the difference between latent power and actual power is here. I think you know, when you study Chinese history, you know what is Battle of Yellow River, 黃海海戰. That is Chinese Beiyang fleet versus the Japanese United fleet. Initially, when China, that is Qing dynasty at that moment, fought with Japan, most people on different parts of the world predict that China would win the war. Why? Because China's Beiyang fleet rank 8th in the world, because those fleets in terms of tons, 吨数, that is quantitatively, there are lots of big fleets. There are lots of China's Beiyang fleets has a lot of, or better say, Qing Beiyang fleets. At that moment, there were lots of big fleets, big battleships, and Japan is one. The number of battleship is fewer than China, and the size of battleship of Japan is also smaller than Qing one. However, of course, lately in terms of capability, China was stronger than Japan. However, during the battle, because a lot of problems happened in Chinese Beiyang Navy, and then the Japan Navy fought well, and also because of the fought well, so Japan won the war. This is one example that latent power is not equivalent to actual power. Then, because of this problem, there are the two forms of power which assess an actor's ability to, say, use its power. Really, actually, how the power is exercised. There are two forms of power to assess how an actor can actually exercise a form of power. The first one is called relational power. That is the ability of one to influence another. They really take some action to influence you. To this kind of influence, because each kind of influence is a kind of force. In fact, we can replace the word influence by force. That is, relational power is the ability of one actor to force another to do something. Force you to do something. The best example is in military matters. There are two concepts. The one here, the first one is called compliance. 威嚇。呢個威逼。That is, a country will demonstrate so-called effects of aggression. That is, okay, a country show you that I will invade you or will take military action if you do not make a concession to my demands. Compliance. That is 中文叫威嚇。This one, deterrence, in Chinese called 阻嚇。That is, this one is more active. A country fight you, use them military force to fight another. Say, I demonstrate that I have the ability to force you to do something. If you do not make a concession or agree with my demands, accept my demand, then I may declare war, invade you. This is compliance. Deterrence is that it's more passive. It's prevention of aggression. That is, a country will use some method to tell others, okay, don't force me to do something. If you force me to do something by military force, then you know the scale of the likely military response. The best example is here. In 1996, then at that moment, there was the first Taiwan presidential election was held there. And then the fourth wonder was Li Tenghui. Of course, he later won the election. He of course somehow support Taiwan independence, and the China government hates him very much, and the China government didn't want Taiwanese to vote him as their president. So, what did they do? What did the Chinese government do? They organized a live-fire military demonstration, or as a missile demonstration here, quite close to Taiwan in the Taiwan Strait area. That is, this is a kind of compliance. Okay, the Chinese government used a threat of aggression to tell to tell Taiwanese people, don't vote Li Tenghui. Otherwise, you know the consequence. I've already shown you that. I may invade you. If you vote Li Tenghui, if you support Taiwan independence, then I will invade you. Held a so-called live fire missile test here. Okay, done. Later, American sent an aircraft carrier to cross the Taiwan Strait here, quite close to the live fire test missile test area. What is the meaning? During the live fire missile test of China, American sent a aircraft carrier to cross the strait. What is the meaning? This is a kind of deterrence. That is, I tell you, China, don't be too aggressive. You know that if you really would like to invade Taiwan, I will respond by protecting Taiwan. Okay. This is compellence and deterrence, a very good example. Then another form of how it's called structural power. That is the use of the distribution of power to biases within a social structure. That is, the social structure, someone will use the social structure to decide how things should be done, how to shape the frameworks within which they relate to one another, relate to people or relate to cooperate enterprises. What is structural power? In fact, is someone utilize the existing structure to get a result that they like. There are lots of structure. The first one is knowledge structure, like the government would like to launch the national education to shape Hong Kong students' mind so that the Hong Kong students may be more patriotic to China and don't oppose China anymore, don't go to streets anymore. The second one is financial structure. That is, the world is the one who hold the financial system can use some policy like account frozen your account, and then if your account is frozen, then you cannot use the money. This is kind of financial structure, how the state uses financial structure. Like U.S. now, why North Korea is so poor nowadays? Because U.S. frozen all North Korea overseas bank accounts. So North Korea can hardly say earn money overseas because there's no bank account anymore for overseas North Korea. Here, security structure shapes defense and strategic issues. Okay, this is quite controversial. By naming, the first example is if the police name him as a protester, then the police will just use minimum level of force to arrest him and then send him to jail. That's it. However, if the police name him as, I don't know how you call him, 火魔法師 or 暴徒, I don't know. But however, if the police name him as terrorist, then the police force can use a maximum amount of maximum level of force to catch him, to arrest him. Like if the police name him as violence demonstrators, then police may just shoot tear gas against him, or even use some kind of so-called plastic bullets to shoot him. That's it. The most minimum level of force to arrest him. That's it. However, if the police name him as terrorist, then police may say use real bullets to shoot him, to hurt him, or use other more violent methods to control him. So this is one example of security structures. A person with power can shape defense and strategic issues. That is, very simple, decide the nature of his behavior. If an actor can decide the nature of his behavior, then it can decide what action in response to his behavior. Financial structures. Well, this is production structures. The one who hold the production structure can hold how economy is developed. Say the Hong Kong government hold the production structure of Hong Kong, so the government encourage the development of real estate this service, but does not promote the development of other more meaningful services like high-tech service. Okay. See you in the next video clip.